They took everything from me. My Sundays, my holidays, my right to watch my own grandchildren grow up. My son looked me in the eye one day and told me I was the problem. That I was controlling. That my presence in his life made his wife uncomfortable. 38 years of love. 38 years of sacrifice. Gone in a single phone call. I was 66 years old, and I was completely alone. But here is the part of this story that nobody sees coming. 2 years later, the same woman who had taken everything from me called me. Not to apologize. She called because she needed something. And what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and what it truly means to be a father. My name is Robert Mitchell. I am 67 years old. I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, with nothing to my name except 2 working hands and a father who showed me what a man was supposed to be. I started hauling bricks at 19. By 30, I had my contractor's license. By 42, I had 7 employees and a business I had built from pure nothing. And I had Margaret. She balanced the books, raised our son Daniel, and still somehow found time to make the best pot roast in the entire county. We built something together, a real life, the kind that is supposed to last. Daniel grew up in that life. He knew what it looked like when a man stayed, when a man showed up. I made sure of it. Every Little League game, every school play, every Sunday dinner, I was there. I was always there. I never once imagined that the life I had built could simply be handed back to me and told it was no longer wanted. Margaret was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the spring of 2018. She fought for 14 months. She never complained, not once, not even at the very end. When she passed, it was a Tuesday morning in July. Daniel held her hand on the left side. I held it on the right. We were both there. After the funeral, Daniel stayed with me for a full week. We did not talk much. We watched old baseball games. We made sandwiches that neither of us really wanted. We sat in the same room because the silence was easier to carry together than it was alone. I remember looking at my son that week and thinking, whatever else happens in this life, I still have Daniel. After losing Margaret, I still had my son. That thought was the only thing that got me out of bed in those first weeks. I held onto it the way a drowning man holds onto a rope. I should have known then that a rope can be cut. About a year after we lost Margaret, Daniel called. He said he had been seeing someone. He wanted me to meet her. Her name was Karen Holloway. She was 33 years old, sharp eyes, quick smile, the kind of woman who commands a room before she says a single word. She brought wine to our first dinner. She asked about Margaret's photographs on the wall with what looked like genuine tenderness. She listened when I spoke. She laughed at the right moments. She was everything a father hopes his son has found. I liked her immediately. More than immediately. I was relieved. Because Daniel had been carrying a grief too heavy for a man his age. And here was this woman who seemed to genuinely see him and want him and choose him. I thought, my son has finally found his person. I drove home that night feeling something I had not felt in over a year. I felt real hope. I should have looked much more carefully at those eyes. It started slowly, the way these things always do. A canceled Sunday dinner, a missed birthday call, a Christmas where they suddenly could not make it. I told myself they were newlyweds. I told myself to give them space. That was what I was supposed to say. But when I managed to reach Daniel, something in his voice had changed. He sounded careful, measured, like every word had been reviewed and approved before he was allowed to speak it. Once, I felt him starting to say something real, something from the gut, the way my son used to talk to me. Then silence. A door opened somewhere on his end, and his voice immediately changed, back to careful, back to scripted. I started to understand what was happening inside my son's home. A slow, deliberate isolation. The worst part, the part that kept me awake long into the night, was that I could see it with complete clarity. I could name exactly what it was, but I could not stop it. Because he was a grown man, and she was his wife, and no one had asked my opinion.
Three weeks later, Daniel phoned. This time, Karen was on the line as well. Her voice was calm, composed. Every single word had been carefully rehearsed. She said, "For the health of our marriage and Daniel's well-being, we have decided to limit contact. Please do not call, do not visit, do not send messages." I waited. I waited for my son to say something, anything, to push back, to say, "Dad, wait, this isn't right." He said 3 words. He said, "I agree, Dad." That was it. 66 years old. 38 years of a father's love. The down payment on his first apartment. The co-signed business loan. Every Little League game. Every graduation. Every Sunday dinner. Ended in 43 seconds. I sat in that chair for 4 hours after the call ended. I did not move. I did not cry. Because some pain is too heavy for tears. Some grief sits in a place too deep for sound to reach. I had survived losing Margaret, but I had never in my life been prepared for the silence that followed my own son saying,
"2 years. I kept busy the way old men do when they are trying not to feel things. I fixed things around the house that did not need fixing. I painted the fence 3 times. I joined a Wednesday morning coffee group at the church just so I would have somewhere to be and someone to nod at. Every Thanksgiving, I set 2 extra places at the table, just in case. Every year, the plates stayed empty. Every year, I put them away without making a single sound. At night, I would pick up my phone and begin typing messages to Daniel. Long messages. The kind a father writes when he has been carrying things too long and the weight has become unbearable. I never sent a single one, because somewhere inside me, underneath all of the silence and the hurt and the empty chairs, I still believed my son would come back. I did not know when. I did not know what it would take to bring him home. I had no idea that the answer would be the last person on this earth I expected.
It was a Tuesday evening in April. I was washing my dinner plate, 1 plate, the same as every single night for 2 years, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I looked down. Karen Mitchell. I stood there and stared at that name for a very long time. 2 years of every reason not to answer ran through my mind. I thought about what she had taken from me. I thought about the empty Thanksgiving plates. I thought about 43 seconds on the phone and 38 years of love. Then I thought about Daniel. I picked up the phone. Her voice on the other end was nothing like the Karen I remembered. She was crying. Not the kind of crying people do for effect. The real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and broken and completely honest. Her mother had suffered a stroke and was in the ICU in Charlotte. Karen had no siblings. Her father had passed years ago. She had no one left to call. She said, "Robert, I didn't know who else to call." And in that moment, with 2 years of silence between us, everything shifted.
I packed a bag. I filled up the gas tank. I drove 4 hours to Charlotte in complete darkness. Not for Karen, for Daniel. Because no matter what had happened between us, no matter what she had done or what he had allowed, my son was somewhere in that hospital, falling apart, and his father was still standing. I found Daniel in a corner of the waiting room. He looked destroyed, thinner than I had seen him in years, dark circles beneath his eyes. The posture of a man who had been holding up something impossibly heavy for far too long and had simply run out of strength. He looked up when I walked in. I could see him trying to find the words. He did not need to find them. I walked across that room and I sat down beside him. No speech. No accusation. No, I told you so. I sat down exactly the way I had sat beside him when he was 8 years old and scared of something he could not name. We sat in silence for 10 full minutes, the weight of 2 years between us, neither of us moving. And then my son said 3 words. He said, "I'm sorry, Dad." He told me everything. How Karen had slowly, methodically convinced him that every person who had ever genuinely loved him was a threat to their marriage. Friends first, then colleagues, then me. He said, "I knew it wasn't right, Dad. I knew it the whole time, but I didn't know how to find my way out." Karen and Daniel are in counselling now, figuring out what their marriage is, or what it is not. That is not my business anymore. What is my business is this. Daniel calls me every Sunday. We talk like a father and a son again. We talk about baseball, about the business, about what Margaret would have said about all of it, and she would have had plenty to say. People ask me how I forgave, how I drove 4 hours through the dark for the woman who had taken my son away from me. I tell them the same thing every single time. I did not drive 4 hours for Karen. I drove 4 hours for the boy I raised. Because underneath all of it, underneath every accusation and every silence and every empty Thanksgiving plate, he was always still mine. And no one on this earth gets to cut that thread completely. Not even the person who tries the hardest to destroy it. If you are a parent sitting somewhere in silence tonight, waiting for your child to find their way back home, hold on. Be the person they know they can call, even when it costs you everything. Especially when it costs you everything.